Doherty, the 6'7" sophomore from East Meadow, New York.
Leadership is learned.
A starter on Coach Dean Smith's legendary 1982 Tar Heels National Championship team with Michael Jordan.
Jordan comes down with a rebound. Clears it away to Doherty. Doherty going in against Floyd. For the layup, it's good.
Leadership is earned.
Head coach at the University of North Carolina and the University of Notre Dame.
You notice Matt Doherty, he is up working every second of this ball game.
Leadership is taught.
Public speaker, author, and executive coach.
And leadership does not require a title.
This is the Rebound Podcast with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to the Rebound Podcast. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this podcast, we focus on the topic of leadership and overcoming adversity in an open and raw kind of way. We discuss failures and how to rebound from them. I became passionate about leadership after being forced to resign from my coaching job at North Carolina in 2003. I went on a leadership journey and realized it may be the most under-taught topic in formal schooling, yet the most important. I'm excited today because with me is Olympic speed skater Dan Jansen, gold medal winner in the 1994 Winter Olympics. Dan, welcome to Rebound.
Hey, Matt, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Oh, of course. Real treat for us and our listeners. Tell us about your childhood growing up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so I was youngest of 9 kids. Had 8 older brothers and sisters, 5 girls, 4 boys in our family, and I was the baby. So, you know, by the time I was 4 years old, they were already got me a pair of skates, and off I went because all of them skated before I did. So they just kind of took me along. And, I grew up playing all sports. I was a good athlete and loved all sports. And, but skating, growing up in Wisconsin, it was actually also, I guess, being a product of my environment. I grew up just 2 miles from what was at that time the only 400-meter speed skating oval in the country. And it's covered now. It's indoors. It's still only one of 2 covered ovals in the United States. So grew up obviously very close to that. And by the time I was, I guess, 13, 14, I was national champion in my age group. And that's when, right around then is when I sort of knew that I wanted to go to the Olympics. I watched Eric Heiden, 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. I watched Eric win 5 gold medals. We only have 5 races in our, in the individual races, and he won them all, which will never be done again. Everything from 500 meters to 10,000 meters. And I knew then I wanted to go to the Olympics, and no dreams of a medal at that point, or certainly not of being another Eric Heiden, but I just, the Olympics were just a dream to me at that point, and it was a fun dream to chase.
At that age, 13, 14, you're in basically probably 8th or 9th grade. Mm-hmm. What was your everyday like then? Like how was it so focused on the sport you became to love? What did you give up? What sacrifices? And they might not have even felt like sacrifices at the time. Yeah,
and that's a good point. I think maybe at 14, not so much. I was still competing in other sports, and so it was winters. It became very it was what I did every day after school. I'd go to the ice rink and skate and practice, and then we'd have competitions on the weekends. I guess though, when I was 16 is when I made the decision that I'm giving up all my other sports. It's only going to be skating. And at that point, it's really, it really becomes, I say your life, and I don't mean there's nothing else in my life. I just mean it's summer training, all summer long in the off season. It's 2 workouts every day. And with that, it becomes, it's not only your passion, but it truly is kind of a full-time job. And it's what I focused on really from that point on.
And who supported you with that? I mean, when you have nine kids in the family. You know,
Yeah, right.
You got a couple of station wagons or a small bus. I mean, you have to get to these practices and you know,
we had all of
meals.
those. You know, that's a good point, and it was hard. So my dad was a police officer, my mom was a nurse. So with 9 of us, we didn't obviously, you can do the math on our finances, but they just kind of found ways, and when we joined the local club, and then, you got ice time and dues. It's not like, it wasn't as expensive as a sport like, figure skating when you're out there, there's only a few of you on the ice at one time, and you're paying all that ice time, or hockey with all the equipment. All we really needed was a pair of skates, and obviously it's more than that, but we made it work, and boy, it was fun times. But it's funny because now, as I said, a lot of the tracks, most of the competitions are held indoors now on these huge 400-meter ovals, but back then it was outside, and Wisconsin in the winter, as you know, is not a warm place. So we had to spend a lot of cold mornings and evenings, windy and just brutal. But I guess it makes you tough, right? Yeah,
it makes you tough, and also you really know who your friends are, who shows up to support you in those races.
That's so true. Yeah. And it's funny, which was mostly family, your parents and other kids' parents, but that's good memories.
Yeah. All right. Now, leading up to the Olympics, you have to try out for the Olympics. The first Olympics, I'm assuming you tried out for 1988.
Well, you know what? My first Olympics was actually 1984. I was 18, and I qualified for the Olympic trials. You have to, skate certain time standards to skate the trials, and I was already one of the top 500-meter skaters at 18, and I actually won the Olympic trials and made that team. And so my first Olympics, it's interesting because people obviously remember the 88 games when my sister passed and I fell, but 84 was in Sarajevo in Yugoslavia. And that was like, for me, kind of the dream that I had set when I first started dreaming about the Olympics. All of a sudden it came true. Here I am, I'm representing the United States. I'm just a kid, basically. I was just fresh out of high school, but that's the one that I remember so vividly because it was all that work. I finally made it here, and it was, the only time like I was more nervous at the trials than I was at the Olympics, because I just wanted to be there, right. And the funny thing is, I almost won a medal. I got 4th place. I missed a bronze medal by just over 1/10 of a second, but it was, kind of what I learned that year stayed with me forever, because I was really proud. I got 4th place at the Olympics. I'm 18 and I'm thinking, wow, this is great. Well, I come home that year and, there's press, there's my parents' friends, there's my friends. They're like, gee, 4th place, that's too bad, and it was like,
oh gosh.
I'm like, wait a minute, do you understand what just happened? But what the press does, and as you know from your basketball career, it's so much about winning and about medals in the Olympics, and that if somehow 4th place can be looked at as a failure, and it's just wrong, and look, a couple games later, I was supposed to win and I got 4th, and that was a different feeling for me, but it's still, it shouldn't necessarily be looked at as failing.
Well, when you're 4th in the world,
right?
Right. A lot of companies wish they were 4th in the world.
Yeah, good point.
And you're right. Now you have this expectation. It's the dream, the skates, a pair of skates in a dream. You had that at 16. 2 years later, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. You're going through the Olympic ceremonies, the walking on the, the field or whatever the opening ceremonies were. Yeah. That had to be unbelievable. And then you almost win. I mean, you talk about 1/10 of a second. Now the expectations probably changed dramatically, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You're the favorite to win the 1988 Winter Games in the 500 and the 1,000 meters, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. The 500, 1,000, certainly one of the guys as well. Yeah, because, after 84, so then it progressed just like you would think it was. The following season, I won my first medals at the World Championships. The next season, 86, I won my first gold medal at the World Championships. And in 87, I was sick. I had mono, but came back in 88. I was strong, feeling great. Won the World Championship 1 week before the Olympics. And so, then the side story of that whole thing happened a year leading up to those games. And I guess it was January of 87. My sister Jane she's the youngest of my 5 sisters. She had just given birth to her 3rd little baby girl. And she was only 26 at the time. And, no symptoms or anything. They were just taking routine blood tests after the baby, and they found her platelets were real low, and she was diagnosed with leukemia. And, when that happens in your family, every one of us has been touched some way by cancer, some form of cancer. But when it happens to somebody else, you just think of it as, that's cancer, but you don't really know what that, like, for instance, I knew leukemia was a cancer of the blood, but I didn't know anything about it other than that. And all of a sudden Jane gets diagnosed. And I mean, at the time too, I remember coming home from the track, my brother was in the living room with my dad, and I could see he had tears in his eyes. And that was just rare for my brother. And, I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, Jane's got leukemia. And I just kind of looked and I go, "What, so what do we do? What do we do about this?" And he looked at me and he goes, "You usually die from leukemia," and it just floored me. And went in the bedroom, I just bawled my eyes out. And, from then on, it was like all right, we're still going to do this as a family. We do have a load of us, and we can all gather around her and be supportive and do whatever it's going to take to get her through this. And she was positive, and, all of that. And then but a year goes by, and just so happened, she passes away on the very morning of the 500 meters at those Olympics. So just strange timing of it all. And then as you probably know, I did try to go out there and perform, but
let me interrupt. So your sister was in Wisconsin?
Yes.
And you were at the Olympics, and the Olympics were where at this time?
They were in Calgary. And so here's the blessing in all of this. For the week before, when I said I won the World Championships, they happened to be held that year in Wisconsin, in my hometown.
Oh my goodness.
And so I skate there, I win the World Championship. I go to the hospital right after. James at the hospital, and take her my medal and show her, and it was odd because we knew she wasn't well, but none of us had any idea she was going to be gone in a week. I literally, my Olympic race was a week from that day. And I left the hospital, and I said, because after the Olympics, I was going to go back to Europe, finish the World Cup season, be back in March. And I said, "All right, I'll see you in March," and lo and behold, 1 week later, she was gone.
So you're in Calgary.
Yeah.
Take us through the day of the race. You get this news. You try to race.
Oh man, I never forget it. So
what happened at the race? And this is why, this is when I talk about this is open in a raw kind of way. We're getting a feel.
Yeah.
We're getting a feel a little bit of what you felt, and I appreciate you sharing.
Obviously, having won the Worlds, I was skating really well. I felt great. Get back up to Calgary. That year I passed the opening ceremony because the 500 meters was the following day. Now, opening ceremony at the Olympics, you're walking, standing for hours and hours, and so not something you have to take it as an athlete, what's coming up for you. And so I passed on that one. I did the one in 84. Anyway, the day before, I'm on the ice. I feel amazing. And sometimes, when you're on and you just feel your body feels great. Technically, I felt good. I just felt solid on the ice. I just felt like I know that nobody can beat me if I go out and just skate my race. So, probably 12 hours later, the morning of my race, in February 14th, it's the anniversary's coming up, and it's Valentine's Day. So it's the morning of my race. The race wasn't until 5 p.m. I think, because it was going to be live on ABC at that point. So the phone, or somebody knocks on we're in the Olympic Village, knock on our door. It's 6 a.m. I knew immediately something was wrong. Well, my dad he was up there, and the day before, my mom asked him to come home because they knew she wasn't doing well. So anyway, the phone rings at 6. I get a knock on the door. Nobody wakes you up, at 6 on your day of your race, unless then it's an emergency. So I get down to the phone in the village, and I'm just shaking. And sure enough, they said, Jane's here. We're here with her, but she's not going to make it through the day. Her blood pressure has dropped, and we just wanted, you to be able to say goodbye. And so, then I'm like, oh my God. So I kind of go through that, and then it's like, okay, so what do I do? I'm still, looking back, I'm still just a kid. I'm 22. What do I skate? Do I not? Do I come home? So we kind of all discussed it together, and I just remember my mom said, it's your call, but just what do you think Jane would want? And right then I knew that Jane was a super sensitive person, and if I would have pulled out of the Olympics, she was my biggest fan, and she would have thought, you pulled out because of me, what are you thinking? So with that, I said, all right, well, I'm gonna try it. But what happened was, it's another thing I learned that day is when we perform, at the highest levels, and this as well, it's of course it's physical, but the mental side is just as important, if not more important, at certain times. And I didn't normally, before a race, there's so much mental preparation. Of course, you're doing the warm up physically and getting that ready, but mentally, I'm going through the race in my head 100 times. I'm feeling it. I'm visualizing. I'm doing all of that. Well, this day was zero of that. I thought, my mind isn't there. My mind's really at home, but I'll warm up. I'll go do this, and kind of put myself on automatic. And man, from the day before, when I knew I couldn't be beat, I got on the ice for warm up that night, and I knew I couldn't. It was like they weren't my skates. They weren't my legs. I was shaking on the ice, and I didn't feel nervous. my body was a different body. It was the strangest feeling. And then, so then I go to the line, I skate first 100 meters, and very first step into the first turn, and I slipped and I was down. It was that fast. So it was a tough day.
Yeah. And then 4 days later, and 1,000 meter, you started out great.
Yeah.
But fell again.
Yeah. I go through 600. I'm leading. I'm on a world record pace, because this time I had 3 days to kind of get my body back to feeling like my body. And it did. And I was doing great. And I get to the backstretch with a half lap to go, and I catch an outer edge. And normally, I would say 99% of falls in our sport are on the turns, right? Because we're going 35, 40 miles an hour. You got to turn left, and, the force wants to take you straight. And that's usually where the falls happen. And I just caught an outer edge on my right skate, and boom, when that happens, it just throws you down. it was just like that. I was down again, and man, and then I remember after that, I was just like, okay, let's go home. Now let's go home and say goodbye to Jane, because this, this is obviously not what we all dreamt of.
Now, in your sport, there are events like the World Championship and other events, but everyone looks to the Olympics.
Sure.
So 4 years of prep, you go from 84 to just being happy you're there.
Yeah.
Then you go to 88 as the favorite, and you not only, I hate to say lose the Olympics, because you don't really lose the Olympics, but you don't win a medal.
Right.
And you lose your sister on top of that.
Yeah.
And you talk about adversity. That's talk about double whammy. Yeah. How do you come back and because the investment of emotion and time, there's no guarantee. And now you're getting a little older, but there's no guarantee that you're going to put all this work in and have a chance in 92 to win.
Correct.
So how do you decide that? Who do you lean on? What inner strength? Is it your faith? Is it family? Is it friends? How did you make that conscious decision? I'm going to come back from this.
I think it is a little bit of all of those things you mentioned. Certainly we're a family of faith. Certainly the family all sticks together. And then, my coach, all of that. And after that happened, I'll tell you, it was interesting because when I did make the decision shortly after that, I'm not done yet. I was still getting better. I knew my potential, and I think everybody did at that point, but you hit it on the head when you said there are just no guarantees. That's what I think. It's the toughest, but also the greatest thing about the Olympic Games. It's what makes the Olympics so special. It's what makes people watch the Olympics with such enthusiasm, with such, feeling. I still watch and I feel for these athletes, and I always did. And I'm assuming that's why the reaction was so big, with what went on in my career. But so without that, guarantee, all you can do is prepare, and be the best that you can be. Like, you can't control others, and you certainly can't control, the world around you, but you can control your world. And so I got very good at that, kind of compartmentalized a lot. I'm kind of an introspective person anyway. I have no problem being alone. And a lot of our training was hours by myself or with, maybe just a couple other teammates, but a lot of it's alone as well, in the off season, especially. And so, I just never, and the other thing too, and I think it's so important with athletics, with academics, with business is like, you never, I don't think you ever reach your peak unless you just love what you do. And I knew that I loved what I did. Like, I enjoyed even the training, busting our asses like every day. I loved it. I loved the feeling of walking away from a training session, just barely being able to walk. You're so tired, or, because I always knew that that long-term goal was out there. Then you make the short-term goals, to reach along the way. And so it just became a process for me. And so, I kept going, and little did I know, there were going to be a lot of success along the way, but then of course, the next Olympics didn't go my way either. Yeah.
I think one of the things successful people do, and I'm in the middle of reading Shackleton's Way, and he was an explorer, and went to the South Pole and on a ship called Endurance, and they didn't make the goal, but he saved all the men. And they talk about, the biggest thing with him was really his optimism. And I think especially by yourself, now you have a coach, but at the end of the day, it's an individual sport.
Yeah.
So talk about visualization, and I think we all need this to pull ourselves out of bed, whether you're running a company, running your family, whatever you do as a leader. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. What was your visualization when you were preparing for the 92 Olympics? When you would kind of be by yourself in the car at a workout, sitting down.
Yeah. So I got really good at visualization, but probably not really good until the last, from 91 to 94, probably the last 3 or 4 years of my career. But I learned about it through others, through sports psychologists that I worked with, through some coaches. And for me, it was always yes, of course, seeing the race, going through that in your mind, but for me, it got so I think there's different ways. Some people see themselves, sort of from the third person. They see almost like they're watching television and they see themselves racing. But for me, and I truly believe visualization is more effective when you're visualizing in the first person. So for me, I would see almost tunnel vision, see what's ahead of me and only what's ahead, meaning like the track and my lane. And but also it's more than just a visual thing for me. It's a feel. I could close my eyes and sort of my body starts moving because I'm going side to side with my pushes. So I could get, and I'm not exaggerating, by the end, I could get to a point. So let's say I would think about what winning time might be that day. And maybe it was, I was the first person to ever skate 500 meters under 36 seconds, which was a big, big deal back then. And so I would say, all right, 35, 92 or whatever, kind of in my head. So I'd go through the race in my head. I'd hear the gun. And I'd do it all, and I'd time it. When I started, I'd start a stopwatch, and I'd feel my strokes, feel the race, and I could get to a point, sometimes within hundreds, but usually within tenths of a second, and never like outside of a second. And I wasn't counting. I wasn't saying 1,000, 2,000. Like it was my strokes and seeing the race. And I got that good at visualizing because I did it over and over. So that was good, but there's also part, people tell you, see yourself on the podium and see all that. For me, it was like, yeah, but that's after. Like, that's going to take care of itself. Like, first you got to take care of business. Don't get ahead of yourself in terms of seeing yourself on the podium. So, not saying that's wrong, but for me, that wasn't something I wanted to necessarily see. It was more about the process.
Mm-hmm. About the process. You talk, a lot of great coaches talk about the process. Yes. Nick Saban, big on the process at Alabama. My coach, Dean Smith, big about the process. Bill Walsh, the famous coach of the San Francisco 49ers. The score will take care of itself if you do what you need to do. And I love what you said earlier about controlling what you can control. And that's all we can do as business people, as athletes, is control what you can control. Show up on time with a good attitude. Right. Stay a little later. Offer to help. Smile. Bring good energy to the workplace. And then, then you may get to stand up on the podium with a gold medal.
Exactly.
But at least at the end of the day, you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I did my best.
Yeah.
And if that means it's fourth place, and this is, I think, something, too, that we all, especially in today's day, Dan, with kids, I'm so glad I didn't grow up in today's day, because when you and I grew up, we're both very similar in ages. I think I'm probably 4 years older than you. You really could just worry about yourself because we didn't have social media, and comparison games are the work of the devil. So you could stay in your lane and put the blinders on and go to the ice and work on your sport and really not worry about what other people are putting on you. Now kids see social media and they see, well, I only have 5,000 followers and you have, 10,000 followers, or look at that person there at the beach on a yacht with an umbrella drink and I'm grinding it out in a factory.
Yep.
How did you block out the expectations of the media, of could be even family members, where you say, this is me, this is my race, I'm going to stick to my game plan and stay to it? And what advice do you have for people, kids, businessmen, people that live in communities, they want to keep up with the Joneses?
Yeah, it's an awesome question, and your points are great because, I've thought about it a lot and how different my journey would have been in today's time with social media. Like we didn't have that. Like email was just beginning back then, in '94, and it was, I remember going to, so my thing, like during the games, I remember going to the USA House, which is right in the village, big village, and it's just where U.S. Olympic Committee headquartered, and so, but athletes we could go in when we needed. But for me, my story at that time was so getting so big, and people knew of it, and so instead of emails and tweets or Instagrams, what were coming in by thick things of faxes, and they were addressed to me at the Olympic Village. So
were they curled up on that cheap paper?
Exactly.
Yeah. You could hardly read them because they were smear. Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. So I would go to the USA House every night just to, I'd pick up those. And now what it started doing though, I started to read these things, and you get this sense of, God, these, like, I know these people all mean really well because the things they're saying are great, but I don't need this. I don't need right now. I'll save these for after the games. I don't need to read them right now because it's just extra pressure you don't need. It's just expectations you don't need, especially at this point. So what I did too before the games, I stopped reading newspapers, probably 6 months out, because I knew what they were going to say. Either he can't handle the pressure, or is he going to be thinking about his sister or falling or all of that. And it's like, look, I've been through that. I've come to terms with all that. And now it's just, here's, I guess, a good way to answer your question in terms of advice. For me, it's strange because people thought, well, he was going so hard he had this one goal and he didn't stop until I got there. Yes, but here's the thing. By the time the Olympics came around, my goal had changed. It wasn't my goal, my last Olympics anyway. It wasn't even to win a gold medal anymore. I knew I was capable. Everybody knew that. My goal was very simple. I just pared it down to, I want to skate to my potential at the Olympic Games. Now, I believed if I did that, I would win, but it took that the end game out. It took the result out of my goal. Now I could just go and prepare to be my best. And for me, I think it was a big deal because it took away a lot of, it allowed me then just the process. Forget about the result. It's all process. And it sounds cliche, but I think I truly believe that working on the process is the way to go. Yeah,
no, and therein lies some joy. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't find joy, and you talk about the grind, the practice, the exhaustion, if you don't find joy in that, all you're going to deal with is misery in the hope of achieving a goal that you may not achieve. Even like you were the best, and you still came away in the 92 Olympics. You didn't win a gold. You didn't win a medal, right?
Exactly.
92, the third Olympics, you don't win.
Correct.
So tell me, what's going through your mind there as you come out of that Olympics? How old were you in 92?
Yeah, so I was 26, and that one, and even to this day, it's a really tough, almost baffling one, because I think I kind of figured out what went wrong. But so I have a great years in between again, and I'm so a couple weeks before those games, these were in Albertville, France. We're in Switzerland. We're training. There's a World Cup, and I'm skating great. I set a world record in the 500 meters. I believe it was my first one, and so now we're thinking we've got two and a half weeks before the games, and we're still training like pretty, fairly hard. So now we're thinking, okay, you're training through this. You set a world record. Now we get to now we rest, because it's time to peak, time to taper and peak. And you're really going to be flying. Well, we go to this little track in Italy, nothing there, and we cut back so much. I think that just the intensity stopped. It was just like we're resting, but we're not. You still have to
stay sharp.
Those days in there where you work it hard and you make your body, go hard. And I just feel like now, and of course I'm looking way back, but I feel like that was a big deal. So we get to Albertville. I still felt fine, but I was just flat. I skated. 500 was just not me. And again, I got fourth, and fourth isn't the end of the world. But this time when, you come in as world record holder, hadn't finished. It was between myself and my German buddy. We were 1-2 every single World Cup leading up. So I hadn't finished worse than second all season. And then two guys had never beaten me before, and I finished fourth. So that was heartbreaking. The 1,000 that year, it was already gone before, because I was flat, because I was devastated after the 500. And but anyway, so I guess your question. So after those games, we made the decision. I say we, my coach Peter Miller and myself. He was a gold medalist in 1976, and we kind of looked and said, now for the first and only time in the history of the Olympics, there's only 2 years, because they started to stagger the games, the summer and the winter games. And he said, you know what? Because he wasn't sure if he was going to continue. And he goes, if you're in, I'm in. Let's go all in and let's do this 2 more years. And right there, I said, there's no question. I was heartbroken, and it was devastating. But then we made that decision, and so we immediately had something to start working for right away. So that it was a help, because when and I'm sure you know this from huge games or tournaments or NCAAs, there's so much build up to that when it's over, like win or lose, there's a bit of a letdown, because all of a sudden that next day there's nothing there, for you to get up and train for and work for. And there was certainly that letdown, but at least now I had these next games to look forward to.
And you had a coach.
Yes.
And it was Peter Miller. Is that the gentleman's
Correct.
name? Yeah. That a partner, accountability partner, if you will, somebody who could be in lockstep and push you and accountability.
Exactly.
And share in that joy and in that process. All right, so now 1994. So now it's interesting. I didn't even think about that it was a 2-year staggered. So if that was 1996, a 4-year period, do you think you would have gone for it?
I think I would have continued, but I may not have been able to make that decision still while in Albertville, saying, all right, there's no doubt I'm going, because 4 years is tough. It's a grind on your mind and body. So I think I probably would have, but I certainly, caught a break there.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
So you're preparing for these Olympics, the last shot. You're now, I'm assuming, 28 years old.
Yes.
Your fourth Olympic.
Yeah.
Haven't won a medal yet.
Right.
And you've always been one of the favorites. And, I love the fact you talk about you didn't read before the 92 Olympics, 6 months, you did not read the newspapers. Now it would be even tougher. You wouldn't be able to look at your phone.
Exactly.
To have that discipline, though, I think Coach Smith would always talk about that a disciplined person is a truly free person, and because now you're controlling what you can control. You're controlling what you're eating. You're controlling what you're reading. You're controlling what you're consuming mentally and physically. And I think that's powerful because discipline is such an important part of success. Whether you say, hey, I got to get to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I got to get this report done by 5 o'clock on Friday. I've got to show up every day with a good attitude to show my people. I got to, whatever it is, to do it on a consistent basis, it takes discipline.
Yep, no doubt. I mean, for me, again, that the training part of the discipline was always kind of the easy part because I enjoyed that whole part of the process. But you're right, and it's still, there's still other sacrifices there. There's still, I was now in those last 2 years, I was married and started a family, had a little baby girl, and so all that comes into play, and which is a whole different side of that, because I think you can, as an athlete, that sometimes you got to be selfish as well in terms of this is what I have to do in order for, to perform, to be my best. And all of a sudden you got these new things thrown at you that becomes part of the
yeah. What do you mean I got to wake up in the middle of the night and change a diaper?
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Come on, I got a race tomorrow.
Right.
All right. 1994. Let's kind of finish up here. Your mindset, I think you touched on, but it's all about perspective. You could look at it, hey, I've lost 3 Olympics in a row. I've lost. I've been defeated. I didn't win. Or you could look at it a different way. You're going into your last Olympic. What's your mind frame? What's your biggest fear? Have at it. Yeah,
so I think from those last 2 seasons, like between Albertville and Lillehammer, it was just so, like, looking back, it was so focused and so, like I said, my goal sort of changed. I think deep down, of course, I still wanted to win the Olympics, but I wanted so badly to just to skate to my potential. And then I started, now the 1,000 meters for me was such a challenge. And all of a sudden now I'm having fun with that race. People, told me to forget about the 1,000 because it was a race that I wasn't strong. The last lap I would tire in I think it was more mental than anything. And then, so the last couple of years, Pete and I, we said, heck with, we're not going to give up the 1,000. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to train 1,500. So my 1,000 gets strong, and we're not going to lose any speed in the 500. And we did it all. And it all worked. Like 94 came along from the first World Cup. I won 500s. I won 1,000s. And so now I'm going in there with so much confidence. World Championships again, 2 weeks before I won that, lowered my world record. And I'm going in there with that great feeling again of just knowing, there's a difference kind of between believing and knowing. And I knew how good I was at skating, and I knew I was going to win. And 500 comes. ironically 6 years to the day of Jane's death, in my fall in Calgary, but I wasn't thinking about that at all. I was confident. I felt good, and just got to the last turn, and probably, it's a race that I was so on at the time. I would say, and this is not, bragging by any means, but if I skated 90%, I probably would have won the race. But you don't do that at the Olympics. You go out and, I was second pair. I was none of the other guys that skated yet, the top guys. So I was going to go out and set a world record, and they'd be done before they got to the line. Well, I pushed too hard in the last turn instead of kind of waiting for it to come to me, and the ice broke away, and I slipped. And when you slip at that point in a race, right at the apex, because that's when you're gaining your speed to come out of the turn, it's, you're done. And tried to get it back too fast and just kept slipping the whole second half of the turn. And so as soon as I crossed, I knew it was done. And now now you talk about the press and talking about the pressure and choking and all this. Again, I knew the talk was there. I wasn't reading it, but I knew it was there. And you got to go through you're required to do press conferences and walk through, and so I'm getting all the questions, but it was a tough 3 days before that last race. Even the other skaters felt sorry for me. I knew they were coming up and giving me pats and saying, hey, sorry, or, keep your head up. And it's great because you got the respect of the skaters from around the world. But again, I just didn't want it at that point. It would just added to all this that was going on. And I had one race left, and I wanted that race to come, and I wanted it to be over. But I also knew, I think everybody had given up by that point because they knew that 500 was my better event. Mm-hmm. But I knew how I felt on the ice, and that was a big difference. I knew I was skating great. I knew I could skate 1,000 meters. Now I actually liked the race. And so that part being in the back of my mind was just a game changer. And then, then I went out and did what I did. So somehow, it was one of those races where I felt bad in warm up, but when the gun went off, it just, everything flowed. It was one of those kind of zone races. And, I knew the whole time I was feeling good. I knew from my split times that my coach was showing me that I was good, and I just had to the last 200 meters. I'm just like, all right, just hang on, finish strong, stay down, keep your technique. And if you do that, this is probably at least a medal. I don't know what color, but it's probably a medal. And then I look up when I crossed the line, and I saw this big WR world record next to my time. And, and even at that point, that my top competitor, he had gone, but there were still 30 other guys to skate. Now, I knew that, almost every one of them had no chance to skate that time, but there were a couple that were good and had beaten me in the past in that race. And so just had to do a little waiting game. But again, when I crossed the line, that was the difference. I didn't care, because what did I do? I just skated to my potential at the Olympics. And what was that? That was my goal. And so I had achieved my goal. So it was. Wow.
There's so many lessons here that I'll summarize in a second. But just one last comment. What was it like now standing on the podium after 4 Olympics, having never stood on the podium before, receiving a gold medal in a race you didn't like?
Yeah.
How'd that feel?
Oh, man. Pretty hard to put into words. Just the relief was one thing. But then you start, I remember thinking, man, this is a short song. I wanted more verses. I didn't want to come down. You're thinking about my sister, thinking about my family, about my parents, about all the coaches along the way, all the people who helped out, like my mom and dad, because we couldn't afford, we're going to Europe to train. And people giving my parents $25 here and there or whatever, just those kinds of things come to your mind. And then all of a sudden, the song's over. You got to get down.
Can we do this again? Can we play that song one more time? Yeah,
exactly. But unbelievable. And the best part is too, so getting home after that. And because when you're there, of course, I'm not watching any of the American coverage, and so then got to come home and just sit in my basement alone and just watch it, and then see the reactions of my dad and in the crowd and mom and dad and my brother and sisters, and that stuff was pretty cool to see, because again, when you're there, you're just kind of in your own world, but you realize it affects a lot of people.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing. I know I'm sure Jane was looking down at you on that podium with great pride. I think that some of the things that we learned here, to me, is enjoy the process, accept challenges. If you didn't accept the challenge of doing the 1,000 meters, you wouldn't have won a gold medal.
That's right.
And in the process, you set a record. So you put blinders on. You listen to yourself, your heart, and I call them personal board of directors. Your coach, Coach Miller, and trained not only for the 1,000 but for the 1,500 to make it that much tougher, so that 1,000 would be easier. Yeah. So many lessons. Believe versus know. Dan, this has been a real pleasure. I could hear you for another hour. Thank you so much for being on the Rebound podcast. The next episode, we'll have former NCAA champion and college basketball coach Danny Manning to join us on Rebound. Thanks for listening. I welcome any and all feedback. You can reach me on Twitter at DohertyMatt. Thank you all.